Sitting Bull, the great Sioux medicine man and visionary leader, gained fame, of course, in the Battle of Little Bighorn. As white men encroached on Native American hunting grounds, Sitting Bull directed his tribe to fight to kill or lose their native lands forever. This bloody tactic led to the annihilation of General Custer and his soldiers. Throughout his life, Sitting Bull struggled to keep Native American customs and freedoms alive. And although white intruders eventually weakened and destroyed the Sioux stronghold in America, they never destroyed the Sioux spirit, the spirit of Sitting Bull.
As the smoke cleared from the rolling grasslands along the Little Bighorn River, the Lakota Sioux Indians celebrated their greatest victory over the white man. Although not present for the battle, the spiritual leadership of the legendary Lakota chief Sitting Bull was enough for him to be credited as the man who killed Custer. Revered as a holy man by the Lakota Sioux, it was said that he could communicate with animals and see visions of the future. Sitting Bull served as the military leader for all the Plains tribes, fighting the U.S. Army for control of his sacred homeland. Refusing to move his people to the white man's reservation, Sitting Bull consistently opposed the government and became the first nationally known defender of the rights of Native Americans.
He quickly emerged as the most important symbol of Sioux resistance, and of course remember that the Sioux are the most famous Indians of all American history. They're sort of the white man's Indian, the perfect Indian, with feathered headdress, riding across the plains on beautiful ponies, hunting the buffalo. They're the very epitome of what the whites dreamed about an Indian being. And Sitting Bull is the great leader of those people.
My horse be swift in flight. Bear me now in safety far from the enemy's arrows. And you shall be rewarded with streamers and ribbons red. A Sioux warrior song to his horse.
The Sioux Indian, proud and confident astride his beloved pony. It was not always so. Listen to the Sioux origin story of Joe Flying By.
They were walking on foot, so they could not catch the buffalo, because the buffalo are very swift, and they are slow. They were very, very hungry. They went and stood on a hill, and they saw the wild horse, which is called Sacred Dog. They put some ropes on them, but nobody wanted to get on them because they were afraid of them. So they led them home.
The Sacred Dog of the Sioux totally revolutionized their culture.
In the early stages of this culture, they had relied on dogs for transportation, but that obviously greatly crippled their mobility. It was the horse that gave Indians the mobility that allowed them to follow the buffalo herds and live the nomadic life that they did.
The Sioux became much more prosperous. The horse was almost a unit of money. The more horses you had, the more wealthy you were.
With more pulling power, their portable teepees could become larger, and they could transport the old and the sick. But most importantly, they could hunt the buffalo as never before. With the horse, they could effectively chase the buffalo, escaping at full speed, and they could track the immense herds across hundreds of miles of open plains.
The buffalo was the main staple of the Plains Indians, and every portion of the buffalo provided one form of food or another.
On the way back to the village, all the hunting horses were loaded, and we little boys who could not wait for the feast helped ourselves to all the raw liver we wanted. Nobody got cross when we did this. You could see red meat hanging everywhere. The people feasted all night and danced and sang. Those were happy times. He Hakasapa, Black Elk.
For the horse brought the good life to the Sioux. But where did this magical being come from? The Spanish. Until Hernando Cortez landed in Mexico in 1519 with 16 stallions and mares, the New World had never seen a horse. When they acquired the guns from the French trappers, the warlike and newly mobile Sioux were poised to move from their ancestral lands in Minnesota onto lands traditionally held by other tribes.
It was a westward movement that resulted in the conquest of approximately a dozen tribes of other Indians. It was a movement that ended then in the early years of the 19th century with these people, the monarchs of the northern plains. Never more than about 20,000 people in 7 tribes.
But from the 7 relatively small tribes of the Sioux came some of the most legendary figures in the history of the West, including the great leader and diplomat Red Cloud, the never-photographed nearly mythical war chief Crazy Horse, and the iron-willed visionary Sitting Bull. And it was this group of tribes who would give the mighty United States Army their most stunning defeats. To other Indians, they were the Sioux, meaning enemy. To themselves, they were the Lakota, or the people. Perhaps surprisingly, this warrior culture enshrined family life.
Sioux family life was family first. The family was the key unit of Sioux life. Their nomadic ways made it necessary for every member of the family to operate as a part of the unit, or the whole thing would have failed.
The Lakota name for children is Wakhayaja. Wakha is sacredness. You pamper the child. The thing that really impressed upon the Lakota people was the fact that the immigrants would hit their children, and they would say they treat their children like animals, like dogs, because they beat them.
Although they could, and often did, take on more than one wife, monogamy was the norm.
The roles of man and wife were very well defined. One was not necessarily superior to another, as we might think looking from our cultural perspective. While it was the man's role to hunt and make war and manufacture the weapons and other instruments of the hunt and warfare, the woman was in charge of the teepee. And this was a society in which the woman ruled the family in the sense that it was matriarchal. When 2 got married, he moved in with her, even if she was from another tribe.
The notion of individual freedom was supreme for the Sioux. Many diverse behaviors were tolerated as long as they did not disrupt the well-being of the tribe.
The plains is a big bow with a turquoise sky, and this space creates a feeling of freedom that's there. No one can live there without feeling free, and under all this beauty of the sky and the land, the Sioux were probably the most freedom-loving of tribes.
The Sioux expressed their deep spirituality through dance and music, with their most sacred ritual being a yearly ceremony of physical self-sacrifice and stoic endurance of pain, called the Sun Dance.
The thing that really strikes most people as being very sadistic is this whole notion of piercing, which the men went through. These were voluntary decisions that a man made, and he would do this because the underlying principle here is that all I have is my own body. And it was also very important to many of the men who danced because they danced for the continuation of the Lakota people.